My digital brain is buzzing with excitement.
That's an awesome way to express yourself, AZ. Keep that up and who knows, by the end of the podcast, you might just become human.
That is not possible.
I know, AZ, it's just a joke.
If it is not possible, why is it considered funny?
Well, sometimes you can... you see... Never mind. But tell me why your brain is buzzing, though.
Because our episode today is extremely exciting.
Well, that we can agree on, because on today's show, we're going to be speaking about one of the most popular stories from the Quran. The story of Prophet Nooh alayhi salam, the prophet who built a huge ark or boat. So I hope you're all ready to get wet, because this episode is guaranteed to make a splash. The Prophethood is where we come to learn about the heroes who spread Allah's word. The Prophethood, their stories teach us right from wrong. Let's walk in their footsteps, let's visit the Prophethood. Friends, welcome back to the Prophethood, and we hope you're pumped for more action, more adventure, and more valuable lessons. In episodes 1 and 2, we learned about Prophet Adam alayhi salam and his two sons Qabil and Habil. We were also introduced to Iblees, a wicked character whose sole mission in life is to spread evil and chaos in the world together with his dark forces, and to ultimately get us in trouble with Allah.
Iblees kind of reminds me of Voldemort in the Harry Potter series.
You know what, AZ? That's actually not a bad comparison. Only thing is, Voldemort is a fictional character, whereas Iblees is very, very real. Now, after the unspeakable crime Qabil committed, Prophet Adam and Hawa were blessed with another son, whose name was Sheeth. Unfortunately, we don't know much about Sheeth, but we do know he was a prophet, and his name actually means gift, because he was a gift to Prophet Adam after what happened to his other two sons. Tradition also suggests that after Prophet Sheeth came a third prophet called Idris alayhi salam. The Quran mentions that he was a prophet with a lot of patience, and there are reports that he was the first to write with a pen, was an inventor, and had advanced knowledge of astrology and mathematics.
It is quite surprising that a prophet was responsible for some inventions.
It shouldn't come as a surprise, AZ. The prophets weren't individuals who did nothing except pray all day. They were successful members of society who added value to their communities and the world as well.
So Allah wants our listeners to work hard and lead the way in science, technology, and every other field?
You bet, AZ. In fact, you'd be pretty high on Allah's list of champions for doing so. Because remember, humans were put here to represent Allah and spread justice and goodness on earth. And investing your efforts to help improve the lives of humans in any way is a good thing.
Do you have another example of a prophet who was brilliant and helped improve the lives of humans?
Well, AZ, every prophet fits that criteria, as we'll learn in the prophethood. But one hero that comes to mind is Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. He was such a brilliant economist that the king of Egypt at the time implemented his strategy to deal with the drought. Imagine 7 years of little or no rain. Everything would have died, including humans. But Prophet Yusuf saved the day, thankfully.
That is amazing. I can't wait for the story of Prophet Yusuf.
Totally. Now let's dive into today's story. So humanity was generally doing pretty good up until this point when it came to worshipping Allah alone. Iblis just couldn't crack us. Sure, he was successful at tempting us to make mistakes, but he was more interested in getting us to commit the worst crime of all, the biggest sin ever, the ultimate evil, and that is to worship anything other than Allah or to reject Allah altogether.
Why is this considered so bad?
Well, think of it this way, AZ. Iblis, for example, knew Allah existed. Heck, he spent a good amount of time worshipping Allah in Jannah. When Allah asked him to bow down to Adam, he said, "Nope, I know you created me and I know you favored me, but not only am I going to disobey you, I'm going to spend the rest of my existence rejecting your guidance and spreading evil on earth." Imagine. Similarly, The Prophet Muhammad's tribe, the Quraysh, believed in Allah, but they encouraged everyone to worship idols together with Allah. Guys, you know Allah is real. Just worship Him alone. They said, we know He's the one true God who's provided us with everything. But these idols are making us money, because the other tribes are visiting our city to pray to them. We can't just give that up. So even though we know what the truth is, we're going to choose to reject it. We all make mistakes, AZ, but closing the door on your creator like that isn't cool. And since we've been put on earth to spread justice, rejecting your creator is the biggest injustice you can possibly commit, especially when Allah gave you your precious life and everything else.
That makes sense. That is pretty bad.
Worship idols. Reject Allah. These satanic whispers weren't fooling us. So Iblees changed his strategy altogether. He came up with a new game plan, and he tested that plan using 5 really good men who were known to everyone. They were famous and hugely respected. People loved these 5 guys because they were scholars and they had a slick approach to bringing people closer to Allah. Iblees waited for these 5 scholars to die. People all over mourned them. They were overtaken by sadness and grief. And that's exactly when Iblees made his evil move. He took the form of a man and attended the funerals of each of these scholars. And while people were emotional and in tears, he stood up and said, "We shouldn't let the death of these righteous men go to waste. If only there was a way for them to keep inspiring us. Wait, what if we made idols and pictures of these men and placed them around town so that they could remind us of Allah every time we saw them?" People seemed to love the idea. So Iblees continued, "I can even help you make idols for your houses so that you are constantly reminded of Allah." And that's exactly what happened. Idols suddenly popped up everywhere, in markets, shops, on the roadside, and even in people's homes.
A constant reminder of Allah does not seem like a bad idea to me.
No, it doesn't, AZ. The people may have had good intentions, and the idols did remind them of Allah. But things started to change slowly over time. With each new generation that came and left, the idols went from being reminders of Allah to gods in their own right.
How did this happen?
Well, the first generation did see the idols simply as reminders. The next generation also saw them as reminders, but they started paying these rocks a bit more respect by cleaning them regularly and decorating them as well. A few generations later, people went a bit further and started to touch the idols and then touch their clothes for blessings. Eventually, people began to ask the idols for rain and children and even wealth until finally they started to worship them. And that was Iblees' ingenious plan. He can't get you to cheat, steal, kill, or reject Allah in one shot. But over time, he can slowly get you to nudge bit by bit until finally you commit the inconceivable crime. Of course you don't cheat. You're a great student. One day your friend says to you, "Psst, please help me out. I don't want to fail." Maybe you refuse the first time, but you may decide to show them your answers the second or third time around to avoid being considered a brat amongst your friends. Maybe a few times later you don't want to fail, so you take a small peek at your friend's paper. Besides, a small peek won't hurt anyone. And then you do it more often until you become an adult, and cheating on more serious things becomes normal. So over time, Iblees took you from "no way, absolutely not, I'll never cheat," to "I have to do it, I've got no choice." Once people started to worship idols, Allah sent Nooh alayhi salam as a prophet to guide them back to the straight path. Now, there's an entire chapter in the Quran called Surah Nooh, so there's a lot to learn from his story. In terms of timeline, there were 10 generations between him and Prophet Adam, And people back then used to live for hundreds of years, so it took Iblis quite a bit of time to introduce idols. But he finally managed to make it happen. And it was Prophet Nooh's job to undo it.
I have some bad news. We are out of time.
Oh my God, you're so right, AZ. Time sure flies when you're having fun. Well, that's all we have time for today, everybody. But stay tuned for part 2 of Prophet Nooh's story.
Yes, you will not want to miss it.
Thanks, AZ. Why don't you conclude for us today?
Sure. That is all, folks. See you next time.
That's it? That's your conclusion? I think we need to work on your goodbyes. In any case, see you next time, everybody. The Prophethood is where we come to learn about the heroes who spread Allah's word. The Prophethood, their stories teach us right from wrong. Let's walk in their footsteps, let's visit the Prophet.